There is a moment, silent, invisible, unknown to you, when heaven moves on your behalf. Not because you asked, not because you were ready, but because something was already written, something was already spoken, and the voice that spoke it was not human. What if I told you that before this day began, before you opened your eyes this morning, before the world around you made a single sound, your name was already being carried on the breath of eternity, not as a whisper, not as a question, but as a declaration? This is not a motivational message. This is not a feel-good story dressed up in spiritual language. What we are going to walk through together right now is something far deeper, far older, and far more real than anything the world has ever offered you. This is about what happens in the invisible realm when heaven chooses someone. And the reason you are here, watching this at this exact moment, may not be a coincidence at all. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end of this, something inside you is going to shift. Let us begin at the very beginning, not the beginning of your story, but the beginning of everything. The book of Genesis opens with three of the most powerful words ever written, "In the beginning." But most people stop there and move on too quickly, because what follows those words is not just a description of creation, it is a revelation of how God works. He speaks, and what he speaks becomes real. Light did not exist, and then God said, "Let there be light," and light was. Do you understand what that means? God does not wait for conditions to be right. God does not need existing material. He speaks into the void, into the darkness, into the nothing, and what he calls forth comes into being. That is the nature of the God who holds your name. Now here is where it starts to get personal. The prophet Jeremiah, sitting in the ruins of his own calling, in a moment of deep confusion about why he was chosen for such a painful mission, received these words directly from God. They are recorded in Jeremiah 1, verse 5, and they read like this: "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Before you were formed, before there was a version of you that could be seen, touched, or named, before the very cells that became you were assembled, God already knew you, already called you, already separated you for something specific. This is not poetry. This is the architecture of destiny. And this is where the mystery begins to deepen, because if God knew you before you were born, then your name was not spoken for the first time on the day you arrived in this world. It was spoken in eternity. And what happens when your name is spoken in eternity has consequences that ripple all the way into your present moment. Now I want you to picture something. Close your eyes if you need to, but follow this image. Imagine a vast, eternal place, beyond time, beyond space, beyond anything the human mind can fully contain. In this place, there are no clocks, there is no yesterday and no tomorrow, there is only an ever-present now. And in this place, there is a book. The psalmist saw it. David described it in Psalm 139, verse 16, writing, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." A book with your days in it, written before you arrived. But here is what strikes me every time I return to this passage. David does not say God wrote the days that you deserved. He does not say God wrote the days that you earned through good behavior or spiritual performance. He says the days were ordained, assigned, predetermined by a wisdom far beyond human calculation. That means the season you are in right now, no matter how confusing it feels, no matter how delayed it seems, no matter how many doors appear to have closed, was accounted for. It was seen, and if it was seen, it was already factored into the plan. Heaven spoke your name, and when heaven speaks, time itself reorganizes around the word. But let us not rush past something that deserves our full attention, because chosen does not mean comfortable, and this is one of the most misunderstood truths in all of Scripture. Think about the ones who were chosen. Really think about them. Moses was chosen, and his story began with a river, a basket, and a mother who had to let go of her child just to save his life. 40 years passed before he heard anything from a burning bush. 40 years of wondering, 40 years that looked from the outside like absolutely nothing was happening. Joseph was chosen, and his story began with betrayal so deep that it came from his own brothers. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and locked in a prison, and the scripture says nothing to indicate that God explained any of it to him while it was happening. Genesis 37 through 50 is not a comfortable read. It's a long, winding, painful road that only makes sense when you reach the ending. David was chosen, anointed by the prophet Samuel in 1 Samuel 16, while still a boy, overlooked by his own father, and then he returned to the sheep, not to a palace, not to a throne, back to the field, back to the silence, back to the invisible years of preparation where God was doing things in him that no human eye could witness. Do you see the pattern? When heaven chooses someone, the first thing that often follows is not elevation. It's process. It's preparation. It's a season that looks from the outside like delay, but is working from the inside like the most precise, most intentional, most sacred construction project ever undertaken. And this is why so many chosen people give up right before their breakthrough, because the process does not feel like destiny. It feels like abandonment. It feels like being forgotten. But it's in these exact seasons, the silent ones, the painful ones, the ones that make no sense, that heaven is doing its most profound work. Now I want you to introduce you to a concept that most people have never fully explored. It's the concept of a divine appointment, and it's different from coincidence in one fundamental way. Coincidence is random. A divine appointment is targeted. In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, Jesus is traveling from Judea to Galilee, and the scripture makes a small statement that carries enormous weight. It says he had to go through Samaria. Now, any Jewish person listening to that in the first century would have found that unusual, because most Jewish travelers of that time deliberately avoided Samaria. They would take longer routes just to bypass it. But Jesus had to go through, and when he arrived, there was a woman at a well at noon, alone. Why was she there alone at noon? Because she was hiding, because her life was complicated, because she had been married 5 times and was living with someone who was not her husband, and she couldn't bear the weight of the other women's eyes in the morning hours when they came to the well together. She didn't know that morning that she had a divine appointment. She thought she was just going to get water. She thought it was just another ordinary painful day in an ordinary painful life. But Jesus had to go through Samaria. He had to be there, at that well, at noon, for her. And in that conversation, her entire destiny shifted. She went back to her city and said in John 4:29, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" And the whole town came out to see him because of her. The woman who was hiding became the first recorded evangelist in the Gospel of John. Heaven had spoken her name, and everything changed. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. Have you ever had a moment that felt too precise to be accidental? A moment where someone said something to you at exactly the right time? A moment where you almost did not go somewhere, but then you went, and that choice changed your life. A book that fell into your hands. A phone call that came at the exact moment you needed to hear a voice. A stranger who said one sentence that unlocked something in you that had been closed for years. What if those moments were not random? What if they were coordinates? What if heaven was navigating you toward something, and those moments were the turns on the road? The book of Proverbs tells us in chapter 16, verse 9, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." You make plans, but there is a hand behind the steps that carry those plans forward or redirect them entirely. And that hand belongs to the one who spoke your name before the foundation of the world. Let us go deeper, because there's something in the New Testament that most people read quickly but rarely stop to fully absorb. It is found in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4, and Paul writes these words, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world, to be holy and blameless in his sight." Before the creation of the world. Not after you proved yourself, not after you developed good habits and cleaned up your life. Before creation existed, before anything was made, before light and darkness were separated, you were chosen. The decision was already made. The name was already spoken. The assignment was already written. This is what theologians call election. But forget the theological terminology for a moment and just feel the weight of the truth underneath it. The God who made the universe, who hung the stars, who set the boundaries of the oceans, who breathed the first breath into the first human, looked across eternity and chose you, specifically, not as a category, not as a type, as you. Your name, your face, your fingerprint, your voice, the specific version of you that exists right now with your history, your wounds, your dreams, your failures, your longing. That version of you was in the mind of God before Genesis 1 verse 1 was ever written. And here is what makes it even more breathtaking. He did not choose you because of what he saw you doing. He chose you knowing everything he would ever see you do. Every mistake, every moment of weakness, every time you would walk away, every time you would doubt, every time you would fall short. He saw all of it, and he chose you anyway. That is not religion. That is love on a scale the human heart can barely hold. Now let us talk about what it actually means when everything changes, because the moment heaven speaks your name is rarely announced by trumpets. It rarely comes with a sign in the sky or a voice you can hear with your physical ears. Most of the time, it comes quietly, through a conversation, through a dream, through a deep and unexplainable restlessness that drives you toward something you cannot yet name. Think about Samuel, the boy who was sleeping in the temple. He heard a voice. 3 times he heard it, and 3 times he ran to the priest Eli, thinking it was him. And Eli, wise old Eli, finally understood what was happening. He said in 1 Samuel 3 verse 9, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" The next time the voice came, Samuel was ready. And what God spoke to him that night set the trajectory for the rest of his life. It was the moment when heaven was no longer distant, when the invisible became undeniably intimately present. That moment is available to you. It may not look like a voice in the night, but there is a moment, perhaps it has already happened, perhaps it is approaching even now, when something shifts, when you become aware at a level deeper than thought that you are not just alive by accident, that there is a weight to your existence, a purpose folded into your very breath. That awareness is not random. That awareness is the echo of a name that was spoken long before you were born. There is another dimension to this that we need to explore, and it is the dimension of warfare. Because the enemy of your soul has also read the book. He has also seen what is written about you. And the fiercest opposition you have ever faced may not be because you are weak. It may be because you are exactly what heaven said you were. Think about that. The attacks that have come against your mind, your identity, your sense of worth, your calling.
What if they were not just random suffering? What if there is a reason that the pressure has been so specific, so targeted, so designed to make you forget who you are? The enemy does not waste his most sophisticated strategies on people who pose no threat. He does not invest in attacking someone whose destiny doesn't matter. The very fact that your life has been a battlefield might be the clearest evidence that your name was spoken in heaven. Revelation chapter 12 verse 11 tells us something extraordinary. It describes those who overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. The word of their testimony, not their performance, not their perfection, their testimony. The story of what God has done in and through their specific, broken, chosen life. Your story is a weapon, and the enemy knows it, which is why he has worked so hard to make you ashamed of it. Let us talk for a moment about the people in your life who have doubted your calling, because this is part of the story of almost every chosen person in Scripture, and it is part of the story of most chosen people on earth. David's father, Jesse, didn't even bring him in from the fields when Samuel came to anoint one of his sons. He presented 7 brothers, 7, and none of them was chosen. So Samuel asked, with what I imagine was a very pointed look, whether there were any more sons. And Jesse said, almost dismissively, that the youngest was out tending sheep, as if David didn't matter enough to be included. And God chose him, the overlooked one, the forgotten one, the one left in the field. Joseph's brothers couldn't speak a kind word to him. Genesis 37 verse 4 records this plainly. They hated him because they saw that their father loved him more, and they hated him even more when he told them his dreams. Dreams of greatness, dreams that made them uncomfortable, and so they sold him. Moses stuttered. He told God in Exodus 4 verse 10 that he was not eloquent, that he was slow of speech, and God did not disagree with him. He did not say, "No, Moses, you're actually a great speaker." He said, "Who gave human beings their mouths? I will help you speak and teach you what to say." God didn't need Moses to be polished. He needed Moses to be willing. So whatever voice has told you you are too broken, too ordinary, too overlooked, too flawed to be chosen, I want you to hear this very clearly. That voice does not have final authority over your life. The authority belongs to the one who spoke your name before time began.
And now we arrive at the question that perhaps has been sitting quietly underneath everything we have explored. The question that many people are afraid to ask out loud because they are not sure they can handle the answer. Why me? Why, of all the people who exist, all the lives that are being lived at this very moment on this planet, why would heaven speak my name? What have I done to deserve this kind of attention? What makes me different from anyone else? The answer, when you find it, is both humbling and overwhelming, because the answer is nothing. There is nothing you have done. There is nothing inherently special about your resume or your bloodline or your natural abilities that earned you a place in the purposes of God. Paul addresses this directly in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 27 and 28. He writes that God deliberately chose what the world considers foolish to shame the wise. He deliberately chose what the world considers weak to shame the strong. He deliberately chose what is low and despised. Deliberately. That word matters. This was not an oversight. God did not accidentally choose ordinary people because the extraordinary ones were unavailable. He chose you on purpose, not because of your strength, because of His, not because of your wisdom, because of His, so that when the story is finished and everyone looks at your life and asks how any of this was possible, the only answer that makes sense is God. You are not chosen because you are remarkable. You are chosen so that you can display something remarkable. There's a difference, and understanding that difference is what keeps chosen people humble enough to carry their assignment without being destroyed by it. Now I want to bring you to the end of the journey, but not without one final image, one final truth that I believe will stay with you long after this video ends. In Matthew chapter 25, verse 23, there is a parable that Jesus told. A master who had gone on a journey returns, and he calls his servants before him, and to one of them, not the one with the most, not the one who played it safe, but the one who was faithful with what he was given, the master says this, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Come and share your master's happiness. This is the end of the chosen person's story. Not fame, not wealth, not the applause of crowds, but that voice, that specific, personal, intimate voice, saying, "Well done," saying, "I saw you," saying, "I knew you before you were born, and I watched you walk the road, and I was with you in the valleys, and what you did with what I gave you, it mattered." Heaven spoke your name before the world began, and every step you have taken since, every stumbling, searching, sometimes broken step, has been leading you toward the moment when you will hear that voice again, closer this time, face to face. This is your story, not the easy version, the real version, the long, winding, painful, beautiful, chosen version, the one that was written before you arrived and has been unfolding through every chapter of your life, including the chapters you wish you could erase. Do not give up before the ending is written. Do not walk away from the calling because the process is hard. Do not shrink from the assignment because you feel too ordinary to carry it. You are not ordinary. You were never ordinary. You were chosen. Your name was spoken in heaven, and everything, absolutely everything, changed the moment it was.